This is something I've talked about before, but I haven't found a different way to explain voice. The way I see voice is when you tell a story to your closest friend, like the person you trust the most. Like, you can tell them anything, your deepest, darkest secrets. You've talked about everything back. They've shared their deepest, darkest secrets to you. When you tell those secrets, when you share that part of yourself with that person, is the closest thing to your voice. And I say this because the story you tell will come from all the most honesty, the most honest part of who you are, the truest part of who you are and what you feel and how you want to express yourself, because you feel safe. And understanding that safe space where you tell a story, to me, is the essence of voice. For me, it took a long time for me to understand that my spirituality is part of my voice. And every time I tried to speak about spirituality to people who weren't the closest people to me, I could feel myself hearing their judgments in my brain. And maybe it wasn't judgments, but just the disconnect. And then I would resist telling those stories. But if I told my closest friends and started to really dive into what feels most true to me, my spirituality and how I see the world and how I want to put that into story, the energy in which I told the story, the sincerity, the honesty, the truth of who I am would come out in every part of me, like even the physicality of who I am. There would be no resistance because there's somebody I trust and they're giving me the grace and safe space in which to share that story. That to me is what your voice is. It's the ability to speak to it's that feeling you get when you hold nothing back in the stories you want to tell because there's a safe space. I feel like if you can say that or apply that to your stories, then you're giving the world the essence of who you are as a person, as a spirit. And more people will connect to you and your stories because you've given the truth of who you are. That doesn't mean you have to give the most vulnerable, deepest, darkest trauma you've ever shared or ever experienced in your life. It just means the things that feel so authentic to you when you share them through character, because it's like you could have a traumatic experience and then convert it into a historical biopic or a drama, a horror movie or a sci-fi, and then just apply those things into those stories. You don't have to get so deeply into the vulnerable aspects of your personal story, but it's that feeling and that freedom that comes with sharing that story with your best friend that I think is the voice in which you should speak from at all times. Can you sit down and just stream of consciousness write? And whatever comes out, don't judge it, don't criticize it, same thing. Don't worry about it. Just write what's popping into your mind and let it go wherever it goes. Because here's the beauty of that. You can tear it up, you can burn it, shred it, do whatever you need to do to destroy it if it feels so uncomfortable when you've exposed that to yourself. But to me, if you're allowing those feelings to just come alive on the page, even if just for yourself, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but you ever have an experience with somebody and might have heard this, that instead of calling them and screaming at them, write it all on an email. Don't send the email, but write it all out, exactly what you feel and how you feel about the situation, all the things you would say if you had that courage, that inner courage to just do it, or if you had the moment back to do it. But that's very cathartic for its own reasons. But I do think you start to peel away at the onion and some of your own personal trauma when you take all the feelings and thoughts and emotions and put them on the page and express them either directly to the person, by writing them as if you're speaking to that person, or say it back to yourself, I've done a lot of that, and I've also done where I'll just talk it through if I'm driving. Now you could drive and talk to yourself because it's very possible you're just on the phone. Pull up an intersection and someone's staring at you. But it's just another great way to kind of to get it all out and just tell the story the way that you would tell it with no judgment in the room. I wrote a screenplay in it started back in early 2000s. It's called Dream State. And it went through a bunch of iterations. And ultimately, the version that I completed back in 2008 and then shared with my acting class, and we did a table read, didn't seem to get all that. It wasn't received all that well. So I kind of shelved it. And a decade later, I was checking other screenwriting companies, their feedback to see how it would. And I'm like, all right, well, this script needs a polish apparently from, it took me 10 years to be comfortable with that. But I'm like, all right, well, I'll revisit the script and then get some notes and submit it to places. And I submitted to some big places and started to make quarterfinals. The notes that came back were very positive, surprisingly positive. I'm like, there actually was something good in there. But the big critique was the final act. And that was review after review kept saying that it felt like the second or the third act didn't fit the first couple acts. And it dawned on me that I started the story, the first two acts, with me telling a story I wanted to hear, a story I wanted to share. And I wrote the ending for the audience. And that's where the disconnect was. At that point, I didn't really understand voice necessarily at the moment, but I was starting to recognize by the clear criticism of the third act that I did write it for the audience, not for the story I wanted to tell. And there is where I lost my voice. I started to look at voice. I started to see voice in a new way because I'm like, yeah, the first act, all me. Second act, all me. I did have a little help on that one, so it wasn't 100% all me. But then the third act, I'm like, my God, I'm writing this for the ending I think the audience wants, not the ending that was organic to the story I was telling and authentic to my voice. Having gone through this last experience on this other script and then also really opening up to the idea of voice and making sure that that last script was more authentically my voice and the things that I wanted to say with my writing partner, now I can go back into this one and make the edits and feel really safe and comfortable about it. Because I do think I cracked open a shell of the vulnerable part of who I was and now can express that because I've gotten some validation on that last script. And that's helpful, right? Like submitting the competitions and getting feedback and doing all those things are very useful tools for just inching you towards being able to let go and release, get into the voice, get into like understanding the stories you really want to tell. And through those experiences, maybe it's not necessarily going as fast as we all hope, right? Like I've spent 5 years in the development of that last screenplay, but I understand the stories I want to tell, and the things I want to share with people, and how I feel more comfortable sharing them. And that to me is like an incredible part of the journey.